everyone's weird in some way. Everyone feels they don't fit in some way. Everyone is going through a similar conversation. Maybe they're hiding it better, or maybe they've dealt with it more effectively, but everyone's going it. So again, go into these contexts almost assuming that everyone is on the same page as you are in going through those same uncertainties and questions. And then you will, again, if you're willing to look for it, find the commonalities and proof that you belong there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Embracing Only podcast with Olivia and Archita. I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Rupal Patel. Her career is notably defined by her remarkable tenure at, wait for it, the CIA. She's been on a journey of exceptional achievements and contributions to national security and intelligence. Her work is in some of the most challenging environments globally, from dense jungles to volatile war zones, involved providing crucial briefings to top military officials, including 4-star generals. Rupal's exceptional service and dedication were recognized with war zone service medals and a prestigious commendation from the CIA director for her superior support to the President of the United States, highlighting her critical role in shaping national security decisions. Some folks would think, well, okay, I'm done. This is the end. Like, I've had an amazing career. But no, she didn't stop there. She transitioned from her impactful career at the CIA and leveraged her insights and strategic acumen into the business world. And she has founded her first award-winning business. She's been hailed as a power woman from Harper's Bazaar, a super strategist by her clients. She came into my world through her book, her internationally best-selling book, From CIA to CEO. Highly recommend every one of our listeners to go order the book, listen to it, buy it, and really navigate and change your journey as leaders. She also has a TED Talk that I'd highly recommend everyone listen to, and it's called Owning Your Weird. Rupal, you are quite frankly my hero, and welcome to the Embracing Only podcast.
Man, I have been introduced by lots of people in lots of different contexts, and you win. That was amazing. So thank you for that. I don't know where to go from here.
Let's go right in. So you've walked into many rooms as a CIA operative, and I envision this whole James Bond style thing that you have demystified in a lot of talks. You're also a CEO now, and in all these rooms, you have stepped in as an only. In your TED Talk, you talk about your mom's sage advice, be yourself, which when you started the TED Talk as well, I was like, be yourself, sure. But you said how that ultimately empowered you to own what you call your weirdness. Can you unpack that for us a little bit and our audience as well?
Gosh, yes. So just hearing you sort of reflect that talk back to me and some of the things I shared there gave me chills, because many of us will have these moments in our lives where memories from even a very young age that really stand out for a reason. And just to give your viewers and listeners a bit more context, that conversation I had with my mom, I think I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And at the time, I was a very self-conscious, very uncertain, very introverted, and almost painfully introverted child who was also desperate to be one of the cool kids, right? I wanted to be like hanging out with the popular girls. I went to an all-girls school, getting invited to their birthday parties at Hello Kitty and all those things that are important when you're 6. And I just never was. And I always had a very vivid sense of my otherness. And when I asked my mom, we had this conversation, I remember being so sad and asking my mom, I was like, Mom, I didn't feel like I had any friends. What can I do to get more friends? And she said exactly what Archita said, was like, just be yourself. And I was so annoyed by that response, because I was like, being myself isn't working, right? Like, I have to be somebody else if I want to go where I want to go and hang out with the girls I want to hang out with. Being myself is not good advice. And so it was always one of those things that I struggled with, this idea of being myself, because it's not just that once I matured and became less obsessed with being cool and popular or whatever, it was also just about, and this is true for many of us, maybe all of us, this idea that we wear many identities, some of which are accepted more broadly, some of which are perhaps a little bit othered. And where we fit can be something that evolves and changes over time, especially from how we look at things. And for me, as an American, born and bred in New York, but raised in an immigrant family. That was always a tension between my Americanness and my Indianness. It was often questioned by others that I grew up around. Oh, when did you first learn how to speak English? And we don't do this in our country. And I was like, this is my country as well. So just some horrific, stupid things that people say, I would internalize a lot of that, right? Because I think one of the sort of double-edged swords that I have in my personality is I'm very empathetic. I absorb a lot of energy and I absorb the emotions and things from people around me. And that can be a beautiful thing. It can be a wonderful thing. It can also be a really damaging thing, depending on who you are absorbing those things from. And so this was something I just carried for a long time over the trajectory of my entire life. Where do I fit? I'm sitting in between many different worlds and many different notions of how I identify and how people are forcing me to identify. And so part of my personal journey has been in really unpacking a lot of the baggage that I picked up from, again, others or from myself around what's normal, what's weird, where I belong, where I don't fit, where I do fit. And it has been a process. It's not been something that like one day I woke up and I'm like, yep, I just love everything about myself. I accept who I am, like no big deal. And the previous decades of my life never happened. It has been a process and an evolution. And I think one of the things that hopefully it gives something to look forward to is that I think some of it is genuinely just a process we all go through. And you reach the other side sometimes just by virtue of having lived a little bit longer, right? Because at this point now I'm in my 40s and I have none of that baggage that I carried for the first few decades of my life. I am incredibly comfortable in my skin. I've found my voice. I'm not afraid to use it. I don't have that overly burdensome sense of what are people thinking about me and do they like me? It's not that I'm a total sociopath, right? But I just now am comfortable in who I am. And some of that did just come with age. I think, of course, I did genuine work and reflection and all that kind of stuff to get here. But some of it is you just got to wait it out. I think we all go through those periods of uncertainty and self-consciousness and feeling like we don't fit. And so it doesn't have to be something that you struggle with your whole life, I guess is where I'm going with this. And there is, going back to the original question, Archie, though, there's a real power in embracing and acknowledging the benefits of being the only in the rooms that you're in, of the attention you can bring to yourself, to the things that you see differently, to the perspectives you have that aren't the norm, that aren't typical, that aren't industry best practiced or whatever it looks like. So I think we can sometimes, again, get so wrapped up in all of the noise around, oh, it's such a burden. It's so exhausting. I'm seen as a representative for my entire demographic. All of that stuff is true to some extent, and we can change it. But it is also a real position of power, being a bit weird, being an outlier, having a different perspective, wherever that perspective comes from and whatever the source of that is a power. And I think we need to start thinking about it in that way. And then how can we leverage that in a meaningful and in a tangible way in our ambitions and our relationships and our careers, et cetera. I think there's a lot there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance, you've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps, here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
Like, my head is going to pop off from how much I'm nodding along to what you're saying. And I think there's something really interesting here with the dynamic of being from an immigrant family. I think all three of us, right, are from immigrant families. You have these unique experiences where it's, well, people say crazy things to you. And I love the whole topic of getting comfortable with your own weirdness, because at the end of the day, we're all freaking weird.
Yes.
All of us. Literally all of us are weird. And it comes out in different ways. Like my husband, every day, he's like, why are you so weird? I'm like, well, you chose this. And he gets the extreme weirdness out of me because I'm so comfortable. And maybe I lock away a little bit of the weirdness when I'm out in public, so I don't get arrested for being super weird out in public. But I think it's so fascinating what you're saying. I 100% agree that some of the comfortability comes with time, because I do think the 40s are definitely the best decade because we give zero Fs about anybody else's opinion. We really do. We really do at this point. We're like, take it or leave it. This is what you're getting. But I think it's interesting because we do have some less tenured, let's call it, listeners that may be still in the thick of, I don't fit here. And something we hear a lot with our audience, people within or external to women, within or external to corporate, maybe they've shifted out of corporate and they're in the spot where they look up and they don't see anybody that looks like them. So to parallel to your analogy, it might be I look up and I see what I have described the cool kids, and the cool kids could be cool because they have power or they have subject matter expertise and you want to be a part of them. What advice would you give women right now that are still struggling to find themselves, right? They're still trying to fit in versus just being. And being happy with being and being happy with finding the tribe that resonates with their being instead of trying to create this persona to fit into a space based on our perceptions. What would you say to those women?
I think one main thing is, first and foremost, you get what you're looking for, right? So I think so often there's this selection bias, or there are many psychological biases that we all come to every scenario with. But so often, if we go into a situation thinking, oh man, there's nobody in here like me and I'm so different and I don't belong here, we will find endless data points to support that narrative. Because of course, there are many data points that will support that narrative. On the flip side, and this isn't just like a weird mental trick, this is reality. And it's born of psychological research. If you go into a certain context thinking, I belong here and I am like the others here, it may not be obvious just yet how I am similar or why I do belong or how I do fit, but I'm willing to at least look for the data that supports that hypothesis. You will surprise yourself in realizing how much you do see and how much similarity you do find. I will give you an extreme example. And actually, it's very personal in some ways too. When I served in one of the war zones, I spent a lot of time with our security contractors, partly because they were the ones who I needed to go out into the world with and to stay protected, and also just informally when we were on base and just chatting over meals and that kind of thing. And one of the things, superficially, we have nothing in common, right? I'm a nerd. I love getting degrees. I'm here in this very specific context as an analyst, as a briefer, as there for my mind, not my muscles, right? They are, of course, the opposite. They're the protectors. They're the ones who are there to physically provide security and all these other things. And yet, over the course of those conversations, they're not my natural people, right? But I was thrown into an environment where I think the percentage of men to women was like 95% men to 5% women, if even that much. And more often than not, my breakfast table, the cars that I was traveling in, all of those things were men from a very different world and context. And then you have conversations. And you realize that there are shared ambitions or shared insecurities or just shared outlooks on life. It's not always going to be the case, of course. But the reality is, if you are willing to look for the data, engage with other human beings, you can look for similar things. It's down to, I think, just realizing sort of one of the things that Archita said earlier is that everybody, or maybe Olivia, you said it, everybody is weird in some way, right? We're all trying to figure out like how we fit. And we're so focused on ourselves that it's hard to get the perspective that actually other people are going through that same process, because superficially they seem like they belong and they fit, but they are going through the same thing. And I cannot tell you the number, for example, of men, big, brawny, muscular, like seemingly cocksure men who I had conversations where they were having all kinds of relationship uncertainty and insecurity. Some of them had some serious weight issues and sort of body dysmorphia issues. Some of them were struggling with eating disorders. So these things that we project on others are so often just that. They're just projections, either projections of our own insecurities, projections of our own biases, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the same is happening in the other direction towards us. So all I would say is, like I shared earlier, to anyone in your audience who's trying to figure out how they fit or if they fit or why they fit, look for those examples where you do, because you will find them. You have to make a bit of an effort. You have to be willing to challenge your own insecurities and challenge your own assumptions about yourself and your assumptions about other people. You can find commonality in any context, pretty much, even with people who you think you vehemently disagree with or oppose their political views or whatever it is. It might not be that you want to hang out with them all the time, but you will find commonalities if you're willing to look for them. And of course, in a workplace context, this is exactly the same thing, right? You're not going to 100% relate with or resonate with every single person. That's just life. But you will find your people. You will find your tribe if you are willing to look. And they won't look like what you might expect. Again, going back to the CIA, my tribe was a bunch of really nerdy looking guys. It was some of these security contractors. It was some badass women who did incredible things that I would never have imagined were even things that a human being could do, and everything in between. And it's not like I could do every single thing that they could, but there were elements of commonality between them. And they were so disparate in their upbringings, in their views on things, in their politics, et cetera, et cetera. But those were my people, right? We found like commonality. And I say this a little bit in the TED Talk. One of the great things about working at a place like the CIA, but also now, to be honest, I've been exposed to so many different organizations, pretty much working in any large organization. Everyone's weird in some way. Everyone feels they don't fit in some way. Everyone is going through a similar conversation. Maybe they're hiding it better, or maybe they've dealt with it more effectively, but everyone's going it. So again, go into these contexts almost assuming that everyone is on the same page as you are in going through those same uncertainties and questions. And then you will, again, if you're willing to look for it, find the commonalities and proof that you belong there.
So much resonates because, so much. Because as I said, this could be a 3-hour conversation for this very reason. When you're walking into these spaces, we sometimes subject ourselves to the belief that we need to show up in defense to protect who we are, why we are, and what we believe. But if we change that to say that irrespective, there are lots of inequities in this world that afford us the chance to speak up or not. If we show up knowing that these exist, but not coming from a place of defense, we give others and ourselves the opportunity to actually be the it we are seeking around us, right? So, Rupal, there were 2 things you said, and I think it was in a blog because you are a prolific writer. Oh my goodness. I was just like, what the heck? No wonder I'm like, you need to have 5 books out because it's unbelievable writing.
I'm working on it, don't worry. Yeah.
Because there are 2 things you said, and we're talking about this journey of life. We spoke about our 40s, and 2 things you said in one of the blogs, which was commit to the process and not the outcome. Get comfortable with the repetition, the tedium, and the trade-offs. That is so hard to do for people who have been raised in, or even like people who are like, we call it as strengths finder activators or action oriented and things like that. But when you're on this journey of accepting who you are and like standing in your own power, it is a process. And the outcomes, and as you said, the people you ended up having in your tribe, they may not be as you had envisioned it. So could you unpack that for us a little bit, and how has it shown up in your life with regards to staying committed and recognizing that repetition, the tedium, the trade-offs will pay off?
Oh, actually, I think to refine it even further, you actually don't know if the repetition and the tedium will pay off. You hope it does. And I think part of the challenge is not just committing to a process, but committing to the right process and being willing to tweak and course correct along the way if required. But I think we have no other choice, right? I guess for me, I try to keep things as simple as possible, but no simpler. And the way I view things is very clear for myself anyway, is if I care enough about something, then I have no choice but to do the work required to get it. So if I want to be an author, if I want to make the impact in the world that I have set my sights on and on making, then I have to commit to the tedium, to the showing up, to the stuff that I don't always like to do, but I have to, because if I don't do that, the chances of me having the result I want are zero. If I do that, I've improved my chances. I haven't guaranteed anything because, of course, a million things outside of our control that can affect the outcomes that we're looking for. So for me, it's about almost having I hate saying Zen because it seems so whatever, but like almost a Zen approach to my efforts. I will do what I think will lead to the outcome, but not get so obsessed over the outcome that I lose patience and then just stop it when results aren't happening fast enough. So I think it's one thing is just being very clear about what's required to get the thing that you want, because we're so overly bombarded with this idea of like quick wins and overnight successes and having things come easily. And our lives, especially in the countries that we're all living in, are so easy that we just expect things to be easy. That's not how it works, right? Like anything, there's so many quotes around this. Anything worth having is worth fighting for. Anything, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And then it wouldn't perhaps be as rewarding. There's so many ways to frame this. So I think you can never guarantee results, but you can give yourself the best chance of getting there if you do the work and you commit to the process and the tedium and some of the stuff that you hate. Or you just have to accept that you don't have it in you and you're not willing to make the trade-offs and the sacrifices to get that thing. I think it really is about being honest with yourself about what you're willing to give up in order to get the thing that you want to get, because it's not going to be easy. All of the people that we admire, all of the people that we view as success stories or inspiration or whatever else, they busted their asses, right? We were not there behind the scenes for the grueling and soul destroying setbacks that they had. We didn't get to see all of the snot and the tears and the emotional turmoil. We saw none of that. They went through it because that's an inevitable part of any success story. But because we don't see it, we just assume that it's all the good stuff. It's all the highlight reels. It's all of the Instagram photos. And that is not true, right? So I think it's also just being realistic about marrying the size of our ambitions with our willingness to do the work required to meet those. And then the other thing, and this is a slightly, again, maybe a bit philosophical, but my view on things is who cares how long it takes? Right? If the goal or the vision or the ambition is big enough, it genuinely doesn't matter if it takes 2 years or if it takes 20 years. If it's important to you, the time it takes shouldn't matter because that time is going to pass anyway, right? We're all going to be, again, if we're lucky and do what we can to stay healthy and alive, we're all going to be 80 one day anyway, right? So whether I'm a best-selling author at 40 or 80, does it matter? No, right? If being a best-selling author, for example, is something important to me, I should just commit to it no matter how long it takes and keep doing the work and keep showing up because that time is going to pass anyway. So either I fill it with pursuing my dreams and obstacles and challenges and all, or I decide it's not worth it and I give up. So it is that simple.
Gosh, and Olivia, I want to turn this over to you, but I want to just put a quote out there that I read that Rupal, you put out, which was never give up on a dream just because of the length of time it will take to accomplish it. The time will pass anyway. Yeah. Oh my gosh, when I read that, it felt like a slap on my face because I needed that right now because I just stepped out of the corporate hamster wheel about a year and a half ago. And as I stepped out on my own, there is this sense of urgency to prove that what you have done was all worth it and it means something, etc. And it was such a great reminder. So for all our audience listening in, get onto Rupal's blog posts and go through it. It will be your one-on-one therapy session as you go through each one of them because it is so enlightening. It was so valuable.
Thank you so much. And yes, please, everyone, I would love to have you read more of what I'm putting out into the world. That is not my quote. I love that quote. And I quote it very often. And I can't remember who the original person who said it was. But for me, that has been my guiding principle because I will, again, just to give you a sense of the time things take. So I do a lot of public speaking now. And I've been doing public speaking formally for the better part of the past 11 years. For the first 6 years of that, I was doing it totally for free. I was like, I just love doing this. It's I like the engagement with audiences. I like having to think about how I'm going to share a certain message that's going to resonate with them and blah, blah, all of that stuff. I did it purely for the joy of it. And then I was like, wait a second, I can also get paid to do this, right? It's not like it has to be either or. And that process took, then now for the past 5 years, once I started formalizing it and charging for my talks and that kind of thing, again, it wasn't an overnight success. It wasn't like, oh, well, that in those first 6 years then just launched me to superstardom. It has been slow and steady, sometimes slower than I would have liked, sometimes less steady than I would have liked, but it takes time. And I would say genuinely, it's only probably in the past 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, that I feel like the momentum is finally broken and I'm in the place that I want to be with that one element of my career. So if I had set out from the beginning and given myself an arbitrary deadline, like I have to do it in 2 years, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And some things that I appreciate do require a bit more of a time limit to it to some extent, but genuinely and generally, our ambitions don't, right? And so I think it's important to also recognize that our deadlines are so arbitrary and we've been socialized into thinking in quarterly or yearly targets. Why are they any more valid timescales than 2 years or 10 years or 30 years? They're arbitrary. So also acknowledge the arbitrariness of so many of the timescales that we put on things, because at the end of the day, it does not matter how long it takes.
I have been itching to jump in here because you ladies you're saying so many things that I'm like, I'm losing track in my head of all the things that I want to jump in. But to rewind for just a second, I think there's a couple things that you said that I got to pull out and just make sure people caught them. The first one about finding your tribe, like embracing your weirdness so your people can find you and you'll be surprised what your people look like, is the most powerful message that I want everyone to really think about, right? Like we often discount because of our own biases, right? And some of it is experience, right? Coming from the backgrounds that we all come from, we've had some pretty gnarly experiences over time, but you have to be so careful not to weed out your potential village because they look like someone that gave you a hard time. Right. So I think that's number one. You also spoke about being in some of these environments, specifically as far as the men are concerned, and finding your tribe. I can't resist the urge to put a plug in here. Now, normally we're talking to the ladies, but I'm going to say this right now. Our men go through so much that we don't know. And right now they're catching hell. Right? They're catching hell. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of men that are doing dumb shit that they should be catching hell for. But we need to be very careful of focusing on our own trauma and doing to others what is done to us. So I will just leave that there about the men. And then lastly, I think there's this courage piece. So I think as you're navigating your journey, and you said specifically not to put timelines on things, right? To know where you want to go. So step one, you need to know what you're chasing in the first place. Otherwise, you're just chasing to chase. And the mission becomes the chase. And you'll perpetually chase and get nowhere if you don't start with that end in mind. So many women, I think, struggle that I talk to articulating what is it that I'm working towards, right? The mission has to be clearly identified. Otherwise, this amazing advice that Rupal is giving us right now is not going to work if you don't start with what you want first. And then secondly, you made a point about timeline, specific to individuals' timelines, not saying, well, I want it right now, or putting some kind of timeline. I would also caution us, specifically for the women that are still in corporate, not to let anybody else map out your timeline either. Yes. I think this is so important because sometimes we'll be like, I want to be a VP, and you'll get some Yahoo that's going to take you 20 years to do. It's no, lady, it took you 20 years to do. Exactly. That does not have to be my story. So it's so important to not do the timeline thing yourself, but also snatch your power back and don't let other people tell you how long it's going to take you either. I think that's so important. So Rupal, there's something I want you to talk to us about, because I think you, in your journey in the CIA, you had real fear.
Mhm.
right? Where you've been in these situations where bodily harm, potentially death were a real thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of us, right? And I resonate with that. I'm sure you probably checked up on both of us. Being a veteran myself, I definitely resonate with that. Having days where you're like, today's going to be the day I'm not going to make it. Like you have days like that. But in the civilian space, we also get crippled by fear,
Yeah.
right? Crippled by fear when you walk into a room and you don't see anyone that looks like you. Crippled by fear when you can't figure out who's foe and who's ally along your journey. Crippled by fear to say out loud what you want and be unapologetic in the pursuit of that. What do you recommend for women that are feeling crippled by this fear? How do you recommend people get over that or move through that? Because I don't know that you get over it. You move through it, right? What's your advice for folks?
Yeah, I would say because so often what happens when we're afraid of something or we create scenarios in our minds about something, I won't say we, I will speak for myself. I have a tendency to catastrophize, right? It's not just, it'll be bad, it'll be a disaster. It's not that just people won't like what I have to say, they'll hate me and throw tomatoes at me, right? Like we go to crazy places because some of us are highly intense human beings, and that's just our MO, right? It's not a value judgment, it's just a description. And again, I'm saying this for myself. Maybe some of you will resonate with that as well. So, yes, okay, fine. So I'm not alone. So, what I do genuinely to this day, and one of the things that I started doing to help me with this, let me just call it what it is, this crazy tendency to just go to the darkest, worst place ever as the default is to make it very concrete, because our minds can be the worst place to be sometimes, maybe a lot of the times, right? And so instead of worrying about this very ambiguous theoretical fear, what I do anytime I find myself getting a little bit nervous or anxious, I literally write it down. What specifically am I worried about? What specifically am I scared of? And then once I make it very concrete and very specific, then I do the next, and this is the crucial step. What can I do about it? So let's say I'm going into, I don't know, a totally new context where I don't know any of the people. I don't know who's friend or foe. I don't know, is my message going to resonate or do I have something to contribute, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well then what am I scared of? Well, maybe I don't connect with people in the way that I want, or maybe people in the room will sabotage me. Okay, well, if I don't connect with people that in the way that I want, what can I do to prevent that from happening? Well, I can do my research. Who's going to be there? Talk to other people who have been in that space, in that context. What feedback or advice do they have? If I'm worried that there might be sabotaging foes in the room, what can I do? Well, can I just, again, I don't know, maybe have some friendlies that I plant in the room if it's possible, or whatever it looks like, right? This is a bizarre example, but I'm just rolling with it. The point is that in our minds, things can be a lot worse. Actually, more often than not, we make them a lot worse than they end up being. And all of us can think of probably endless examples of us worrying about something being this big disaster. And then the reality was far less bad. Even if it was horrible, it wasn't as bad as we anticipated it. So to short circuit that process, make it concrete, literally write it down or put it on your computer, wherever, but physically get it out of your head. Be very specific about what your fear is. And then the rest of that energy that previously would have been wasted spinning yourself into a tizzy in your own mind, channel that towards finding solutions, creating contingency plans, whatever it looks like, preparing yourself maybe a bit better, because that's all you can do, right? That all you can do is what you can do. So you can't anticipate every outcome. You can't anticipate every scenario. But if you crystallize and make very concrete for yourself what your fears are, then it becomes a lot easier to come up with solutions, to come up with ways of mitigating that outcome. And that's where your efforts are best channeled. And what can you do, right? Focusing on what you can do instead of all of the things that are outside of your control. In a workplace context, it can be exactly the same thing. What if I get rejected for promotion? Well, fine. That is a possibility, but what can you do to manage that process and make the outcome more like what you want it to be? Not guarantee, right? We know that the outcome is never guaranteed, but what can I do that's within my control to make it more likely? I can read up on all of the promotion requirements and make sure I tick them off. If I have that conversation, I can go in prepared and say, well, look, here are our company's requirements. Here's how I meet all of them to make it very, easy for the person to say yes. There's all kinds of prep that we can do that is far more valuable than just staying fearful or worried about something and leaving it at that.
I'm cheering over here. I'm absolutely cheering over here because I think controlling the controllables, it's something that the audience hears us say all the time. But I think you articulated it so well why we say that. The why behind that is because you can literally, and over time, if you're writing the stuff down, actually, I learned this little trick from Archita because I'm not naturally a journaler necessarily. I'll ruminate, but I'm not putting it down on paper. And I've noticed the times when I'm having a panic attack, which happens more often than you would assume, but the times that I'm having a panic attack, writing down what scares me, and then I double back and I write down once the event or whatever has happened, like what the actual outcome was, you can go back and look at your own trends and be like, every time I get upset or this fear, this feeling that I wrestle with takes over me, I have 20 examples now of how it was fine, right? And you start to, when you do the work here, you start to realize your own patterns that like, hey, crazy pants, it's never as bad as you're making it in your head. Like never.
Exactly. What, right? So what if it does go wrong? So what if it is a totally unmitigated disaster? Again, I can only do what I can do. I did the best in the moment. I did the best with what I could, with what I had that day, where I was that day. So what, right? And I appreciate that there are some so whats that have higher stakes than others. So I'm not diminishing the importance of any of these situations, but also I think we can get so weighed down by the way, again, what's going on in our heads that sometimes just thinking through, well, so what? If I don't get that promotion, or if I do bomb that presentation, or if, again, make it very concrete. What is going to happen? What is the actual thing that would happen if in that worst case scenario? And you'll find more often than not, especially if you keep track of it, you can survive professionally, personally, physically, bodily, pretty much any of the worst case scenarios that you're anticipating. So what?
Gosh, yes. This so what is an interesting two words, quite frankly, because I was raised this is my personal journey, right? So when you're raised a certain way, where it's figure out all your so whats, that sends you into a whole other tizzy of absolute madness because you feel unprepared if you enter a situation and you don't have the 5 so whats figured out. And the reality is, like, when you're out on your own, building your own business or starting something that's new, like you've been out of the corporate world, you're re-entering the corporate world for the first time, you don't know what so what's to even envision because it's a brand new situation. And so that's where I feel like we need to give ourselves permission. And I think you talk about this, and I'm just looking at this. What do you call it? You called it let's see approach. So talk to us about that, because I just love that so much. And I was like, what the heck? There's an Indian woman of Indian origin who says, let's see. This is nonsense. Caucasian garbage. So I was like reading it and I was like, oh my God, I resonate with this. Because you talk about pushing beyond your self-imposed limits. So tell us more about this let's see approach.
I think this ties into something that we talked about earlier, right? This obsession we have with cause and effect. If I do this, then this will happen. If I put in 10,000 hours of effort, then I will get this outcome, or whatever that causal connection we make. And I think we can get so obsessed over the knowing what the outcome is, the predictability, the certainty, that we forget that, again, very little in life is certain or specifically predictable. And you have to just be willing to let's see, right? Just see what happens. Be a bit more, again, a bit lighter and a bit more experimental in your approach to things, because you never know where the breakthrough is going to come from, where the business opportunity is going to come from. And this sort of ties into something Olivia was saying earlier when we were talking about deadlines. My view writ large around this topic of experimentation and let's see is decide the what, 100% know your ambition, your vision, et cetera, but be open to the how. So that's where let's see comes in, right? How do I get there? Well, let's see. I'll try this, or maybe I'll try that. And then, of course, be open to the when, right? Decide the what, be open to the how and when. And life is genuinely an experiment, right? We like to think that there's a plan and we've planned it and we've executed on this idea and we've made our checklists and our strategies. Fine. But also in the actual execution, there was a lot of just mini experimentation happening. Oh, I'm going to reach out to this person who I found on LinkedIn and see if they'd be willing to have a chat about something. Let's see what'll happen. Maybe it'll go somewhere. Maybe it'll go nowhere, but let's just see. Or I'm going to leave my corporate job. I don't have a clear idea necessarily of the type of business I'm going to lead, but I've got some savings that I can live off of. Worst comes to the worst. And I've had this conversation when I started my first business. Worst comes to the worst, I can become like a supermarket truck driver or work at Starbucks, right? And
True.
I'm not saying that to disparage any of work or anything. The point is that we can all just figure it out. If we needed money in a pinch, we would find a way. We're never, and I'm being very broad brush here, but I imagine if you have the luxury of being able to invest time to listening to a podcast like the one that we're on right now, you're probably in a relatively comfortable position in the sense of it's never going to be that bad, right? You probably have friends or family or live in countries where there's some sort of a social safety net, or there are people that you can rely on. You're never going to be homeless on the street. You probably are resourceful because you're listening to podcasts, you want to learn, you want to grow. You'd figure it out if you had to. So again, this obsession over knowing what is going to happen, I think really also takes away, and I started writing an article about this, about the joy of the unknown, right? There is some real pleasure in not knowing and in just taking the ride and in testing yourself. It's not to say that it's like joyful in the sense that you're like laughing and like it's rainbows and bunnies all the time, but it's joyful in a deeper sense, right? That satisfaction that comes from not knowing what's going to happen, but doing your best to try to go to where you want to go, of trying things that you wouldn't have otherwise tried, of pushing yourself outside of your limits. And I think that's the only way that any of us can really tap into the potential, right? We have infinite potential. I genuinely believe human beings, to a person, we have infinite potential. We are just, that potential gets shrunk or caveated, or we lose sight of it through life, right? And that's probably true for everybody. So one of the ways you can start playing around with seeing, well, what am I made of, right? How am I going to test myself? What do I have inside me, is by having this let's see approach, not obsessing over having to do this thing by this time, but let's just see, I'll try this. And if it works, great. And if not, I'll try something else, or I'll make this tweak and then try again, right? It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but it really is about taking things seriously, but not being somber about how we approach our ambitions and our goals in our lives, because fundamentally, this is all we've got, right? This is this one chance that we've got. Like, why are we gonna, my view, and this, I have to tell myself this all the time, if I'm lucky, I will live another 50 years. That's it, right? The next 50 years are all I have. So either, again, this goes back to keeping it very simple. Either I spend those next 50 years playing around, seeing what happens, like, of course, making very thoughtful and intentional experiments, but having that let's see approach instead of being like, well, if this doesn't happen by the time I'm 65, then it's not worth happening, right? I think we can, overburden ourselves with this baggage and this noise that we're given from society, from families, from certain cultures, backgrounds, et cetera. It doesn't have to be that way. And then the last thing I will say on this, and this again ties into something Olivia shared around other people giving you their timelines. Whenever you hear yourself saying, I should do something, my first response to that is to question where the should comes from, because we are all products of families, school systems, societies, cultures, maybe religions, whatever it looks like, that give us these like rules. This is what life is supposed to be like, and that's what success is, and that's what, fine. If that resonates with you, if that aligns with your values and who you are as a person, cool, by all means, follow that. If it doesn't, if there is that tension, and if you feel like, oh, well, why should I? Or why question it, right? I think whenever I do this now, whenever I find myself saying I should do this, or I shouldn't do that, or I should be here at this point in my life, or I should be this kind of a parent, or I should be this kind of a leader, where is that should coming from? Did some bullshit, I don't know, meme or newspaper or a TV show give me that idea? Or is it something that I genuinely think I should do? And once you unpack that, you might surprise yourself and see actually a lot of the shoulds come from other people and other sources, and are not aligned with our values or our goals or our ambitions. When I graduated from my MBA, my entire family, except for my dad, told me I should get a job. Well, why, right? Theoretically, it's good advice, right? Don't start your own business and do this very sort of risky thing. You should go and work for a big name firm and put that on your resume. But that didn't align with my values, right? At that point in my life, I wanted to push myself, to test myself, to see if I had what it took to start a business from scratch. And so those shoulds aren't always ours for the taking, right? So be very careful about what you let in. Or my friend puts it so beautifully, stop shooting all over yourself.
I love that. Okay, that's something else that I might shamelessly steal.
Make it a t-shirt.
Yes. Shooting over yourself. I love it so much.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that, Rupal. I love that so much. You have no idea. I can't tell you how much I resonate with that.
No,
but I would say what you said was so powerful in terms of, I think we have been wired to do so much, right? And you're right. I think Archita and I call the should syndrome giving away your power.
Yeah.
Whenever you're saying I should, you have surrendered your power to some other entity to tell you what direction you should be going in that may not align with you. But I think you bring a different dynamic in saying we should be here enjoying the human experience. Make mistakes. It's messy. It's fine. It's an experiment. Figure out what works for you and don't let anyone define success for you, but you is so important. And the reason why it's important, and people will hear me say this, I think the more you understand how your brain works, the easier it is to work yourself out of some of these bad behaviors or do the unlearning work that we all need to do. And when your brain is so wrapped up in the timeline, in the shoulds, in the I musts, in the how do I get here, it's sending a threat detection signal to your brain. And guess what your brain does? It locks down. And when it locks down, that's when the anxiety, the imposter syndrome, the lack of creativity, the lack of innovation, you can't think clearly. That's when all of that stuff happens. So really embracing this concept of I'm here having an human experience. I'm going to mess up. It's going to be fine. It's going to be an experiment. You're giving your brain permission to breathe. And the creativity that will come from that can only serve you well.
Correct. Yes, 100%. It'll free your brain to notice opportunities that you might not otherwise have noticed. You'll find things that you're looking for, new connections or new opportunities or interesting ideas when you aren't so strictly narrowed down into this little box. So I think it opens you up to possibility. There's endless possibility. There are so many things that we could do or not do. And so again, just if you're a bit more open to receiving it, you will surprise yourself at how much more is out there than you may have initially thought.
So Rupal, I have like 10 more questions to ask you, but we are at time. So this is what I'm going to do though. I'm going to give the gift of two, actually, just because that's all we have time for. And then I'm going to, of some things that you have shared with your audience before, because I really want our audience to grab onto this. And I want you all to go and spend a few hours this weekend just reading about everything that Rupal has written out there. And if you have not bought her book, get her book. But two things I want to put out there in the context of everything that we're just discussing. You shared something which is expand the life of your mind.
Yeah.
When I read that, I had to sit with it really and take time to understand, like, how am I regularly feeding my brain with dissonant thoughts that are different from mine, with ideas that are different from mine, with not small ideas different from mine, but really big ideas, really big thoughts. So just with what you said, expand the life of your mind, as Rupal urges us to do. And then the other one, which is something Olivia and I share a lot about, we flip it and we talk about the no's, but you said be deliberate with your yeses, because on your journey to achieving this thing that you're really clear on what you want to get to, and all these shoulds like interacting with you, if you are not deliberate with your yeses and not selective about what you say yes to, because I know I struggle with it, being the firstborn, people pleaser in the family, it's a constant unlearning I have to do. You then do get caught up into the should whirlpool that like sucks you in. Ladies and gentlemen, there's one more last thing I want to share, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Rupal, is this amazing quote that you brought in from Kung Fu Panda, which is just phenomenal. Oh my gosh, we love that movie here at home. But if you only do what you can do, you will never be more than you are. Goosebumps. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rupal. First, tell our audience, if you want to emphasize on any of these, please do so, but also where they can find you, how they can book you, to come and engage their audience. And then Olivia is going to close us out.
Amazing. So I'll answer the easy question first. Where you can find me is I'm on Instagram at Rupal Y Patel, or you can find me on my website, which is also rupalpatel.com. So make sure you add the Y, the middle initial, but yes, just rupalpatel.com. And then you can learn all about ways that we can work together with your company or individually, et cetera. But yeah, I think the intentionality behind what we do in life is probably the recurring theme in everything that I do. And I pull an inspiration from things like Kung Fu Panda, or astrophysics is my one go-to place for just expanding the life of my mind. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is probably like my favorite human being. He pulls me out of the depths sometimes where I'm like, God, the human race is headed towards like Armageddon and calamity, right? I'm like, nope, we're good, because there are still people in the world who are like Neil deGrasse Tyson and we'll be okay. So just a random aside, but I think, yeah, it's about being intentional, right? It's about what I shared earlier. We have this one shot. If we're lucky, we'll have 80 plus years on this planet. So be thoughtful about how you're investing that time. And most of these things won't be easy. You might have to let go of relationships or ideas or self-identities that you held onto so dear for so long. But at the end of the day, this is your one chance. Make it what you want, right? Do it with integrity, do it without destroying other people or the planet, but make it count in whatever way you want to make it. I think that's really, for me, is the big thing, is about just, not wasting this massive gift that we all have, which is being alive.
Love it.
Amazing. Well, I think, Rupal, that takes us home for certain. I encourage everyone, like Archita did, to go check out literally any and everything that Rupal is doing. Go find her, check it out, expand your mind. And I think you left us with the best wrap up that we possibly could have by just enjoy your life. Enjoy your life experience and work hard to try new things. You never know where those paths will take you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us yet again. We're closing out here. We hope to see you on the next one. So as always, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.